Welcome to the Contractor Lead Podcast. I'm your host, Aidan Hennebree. Today I'm joined by my co-host, Brenda McEwen, and we are sitting down with Brenda Hanna. Now, if you've known Boshart for any length of time, you probably know the name Brenda Hanna. Brenda has served at Boshart for 37 and a half years in a whole variety of different roles, starting out on the ordering desk, working in sales, and now in pricing. And so with that, Brenda has a lifetime of experience, knowledge, funny stories, and great takeaways for you to improve your business. So without any further ado, let's get into it. Brenda Hanna, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for asking me. It'll be fun.
Yeah, you are someone that we've had in mind for quite a while, so I'm very, very excited to have you on the show. And of course, to my co-host, Braidlin, thank you for being here as well.
Thank you. I'm excited to do this with you.
I know, this will be good. You've known Brenda longer than I have, so you
Yes.
might be able to reach into the depths of your memory and come up with some really interesting things to ask her. But yeah, this is going to be a cool episode for sure because it might be a little bit different from some of the other ones we've done, where this is going to be maybe a little bit more personal and just kind of asking about your experience, right, Brenda? So for anyone tuning in today who doesn't know who you are or what you do or how long you've been at Boshart, can you give us a bit of an overview of your career here?
Certainly. So I've been with the company a little over 37 years. And
No small feat.
yeah. And when I started, I believe there were 14 employees total.
Okay.
So it was a very, small, close atmosphere. When I started, I basically did whatever needed to be done as far as helping out in the office. So I helped do filing. I helped assemble catalogs. I helped stuff envelopes to put in the mail, the invoicing, and basically, just kind of did whatever was needed. And then I was asked to help out on the order desk, which scared me because I knew nothing about insert fittings and pitless adapters or tank tees, and I thought, oh boy. And I remember saying to Gary, I don't know if I can do this because I don't really understand the products. He said, you'll be fine. You'll learn more as you go. And so that kind of, I guess, started the launch into my sales career. So I helped out on the order desk and then was asked if I would consider taking a territory in Canada, whether it be Eastern or Western Canada, as we were making some changes internally. When I started, Mel was the only salesperson that traveled outside. So he traveled all of Canada. And that was amazing. So they did some shifting around, and I said, sure, I could try that. So I picked Western Canada. I don't even really know why I picked West versus East, but that was my choice. So then, I was kind of the dedicated contact person for those customers, and the territory was Thunder Bay to BC. So that was quite a range.
That's three time zones? How many times is that?
Yeah, three. So that was fun, and the customers were very patient, and I was learning, and they were just so helpful. And I think the Western Canada customers that I learned with, I still think to this day are some of my favorite people that I met. So that went well, and then we decided to maybe expand sales into the U.S. market. So again, was asked would I help do that? And I said, sure, I'll give that a try. So over time, that was working with a lot of reps and traveling. So while I was still doing Western Canada, I was also doing some of the U.S. And then as our U.S. business grew...
So, sorry, hold on. I'm just going to pause there. You're saying you're doing Western Canada and the U.S.? Because I know
Correct.
that you've covered those two territories.
Yes.
I did not know there was overlap there.
There was overlap.
Okay, sorry, continue.
No, that's fine. So it was like, as we set up reps and got customers set up, it was like the whole U.S. right at the very beginning. Now, it didn't involve a lot of travel at that time, but it was more just reaching out to customers. And as our sales grew in the U.S., it obviously could not be handled by one person. And Julie was working for us then too, so we split the U.S. in half. So this is where it gets even a little crazier, because I was still doing Western Canada, but our business in the U.S. was more on the east, where I had started. So my territory became Eastern U.S. and Western Canada. And people would look at you like that doesn't even make sense. And it's like, no, but you know what? That's how it works. So then, U.S. sales kept growing, and we were hiring more reps and people. And then came COVID, and we were making some other changes, and I was asked if I would come back and just focus on Canada, and I was excited to do that. So I was going to be like the Canadian sales manager and looking really forward to traveling across Canada. And as I said, COVID hit, and then everything kind of, as far as travel, got put on halt. And I didn't do as much travel then, but, we hired, additional staff. And then as I was, heading towards retirement, position came up for pricing. And I thought, I could see that, years ago, that this would have been a very good position to have developed because things were getting very busy, and you're looking at U.S. Canadian pricing, and it was handled by a few different people. So when this position was developed and I was asked if I would do it, I thought, yeah, I was on board for that. So kind of started doing a lot of miscellaneous jobs and went into sales, different sales territories, and then ending up in pricing. So.
Wow. Well,
yeah.
I mean, incredible, right? And there's so much detail you're glossing over that surely we're going to get into some more. But I want to back up just a little bit because I'm a little hazy on the details, but I would love to know, you almost did not take this job, or maybe it's fair to say you might have been dissuaded a little bit or something. So maybe without throwing anyone under the bus or shaming anyone,
Which I would never
could
do.
could you just expand a little bit on that? Because I think that's interesting.
So I was in the banking industry for a number of years and really ready to make a change. And I remember when I went to my boss at the time and said I was leaving, and I was going to work for this small family-owned business. And he said, oh, no. He said, you're making the biggest mistake of your life. He said, you never want to get involved in a family business. He said, family will always come first. There'll be no opportunities for you to advance. And he said, I really think you should reconsider because I think you'd be making a big mistake, which was anything but the truth because I was given so many opportunities for advancement. And, over the years, it's just been great. And I have ran into him a few times since I left. And, he's always checking how it's going. And I would always make sure to say, hey, we're growing and I'm advancing. So I proved him wrong, which was good.
I'm glad that you decided not to take that advice, and I'm glad that
Well,
you
I
stuck
do,
it out.
like I did say earlier, I remember the first week and looking through the catalog, and I honestly felt maybe he was right because I knew these products were all foreign to me. I thought, what have I gotten myself into? This is just crazy, but it all worked out.
So when did you feel like you kind of hit that turning point of this is where I want to see myself be for the next, 30 years?
Yeah. Well, it's funny because when I would be, doing a lot of traveling in that, and people say, oh, how do you like that? Is that, what you were hired for? I said, no. If somebody would have told me I was applying to be a sales manager of a territory, I probably would have said, no way. But I think pretty early on, I knew it was a great place to work, and I just wanted to contribute in any way I could. And I still feel that way. After 37 and a half years, I can honestly say there has not been a day that I did not want to get up and come to work.
Wow.
And then people say, oh, yeah, right. And it's no, that is honestly the truth because no 2 days were ever really the same. It was always busy and there was stuff going on. And, as you traveled and met different customers and reps, it just added a whole new dynamic. So I think even though maybe the first couple weeks, months, I was a little nervous about getting into sales, once I got into sales, it was yeah, I love this. And I just wanted to, grow that side of the business. And it was fun to see how things grew over time and that you were a part of that. So, yeah, it was,
Cool.
It was earlier than I probably, looking back, would have thought I would have
Right.
felt that way.
I love that. Do you remember the first time you hopped on a plane for the company and went out west, and what that was like? Were you stressed out? Were you feeling confident
Well,
by then?
in the beginning, I usually traveled. I actually traveled a lot with Mel
Okay.
because he still technically traveled that area. He was the outside person, and I was kind of more still the inside contact, but I would go travel with him to see customers and go to trade shows. So yeah, those were pretty uneventful, but I do remember traveling to the U.S. a few times early on. That I remember getting to the airport and realizing that I didn't have my passport,
Oh no.
and panic mode hit in. So luckily, I was able to get a hold of my husband, found the passport. We met in Guelph halfway, and I still managed to get to the airport and get on the flight on time. But it was like really nerve wracking. I thought never again. I'd always do a double check to make sure I had my passport.
I'm sure just some of the first of many flight delays and cancellations and all kinds of things that you'd come up against, eh?
Yeah, I remember spending a couple of nights in airports just because of flight delays, and then you want to be there early in the morning. So, don't recommend it. It's not.
Yeah.
Atlanta Airport is not a place you want to spend the night, but sometimes you just have to. But
You do what you got to
for
do.
the most part, like for all the travel I did, the delays and flight cancellations weren't as bad, or maybe you just kind of expected it and it didn't. And I love to people watch, so there's no better place than at an airport to people watch. So the time actually went fairly quickly.
I'm going to ask you what might be an impossible question. Could you estimate either how many flights you've taken or how many millions of miles you've flown?
Oh boy. That would be really tricky. But I do know one year when I was traveling a lot in the U.S., I had 96 flights that year. And I know it because I was 4 short of meeting a plateau. But I didn't realize that I was that close. And at the end of the year, it was like 96 flights. Wow, that's a lot. That was probably the busiest year. But yeah,
there's something like 200 working days in a year, give or take. So like that's or 250 maybe my math's off, but that's a lot. That's approaching what, once every 2 days you'd be on a flight of some kind.
It was.
That's a lot.
I was gone a lot.
Wow.
So but I mean, it's again back in those days when you were drumming up business and meeting customers. A face-to-face interaction was so important. So we did a lot of state trade shows, and that's how you got to know people, and that's where you got to meet potential reps. And so it was a lot of work, but it was, looking back, it was well worth it.
Mm-hmm.
So comparing and contrasting the U.S. and Canada. So you started in Canada, and then you started doing stuff in the U.S. How different was that business? Because in the West, obviously, you're traveling with Mel. You're maybe you're becoming the face of existing relationships. But in the U.S., as you just said, you're doing state trade shows to drum up new business. So from your perspective as a salesperson, what was that transition like? Was that pretty smooth? Was it natural? Because prospecting is a totally different thing in sales than maintaining existing relationships, right? So what was that like?
Well, that was fun too, because it was, you had nothing. Basically, we had a few customers that we sold to, but it was just it took a lot of work to get a new customer on board, because for one thing, they had never heard of Boshart Industries, and like, we're this company out of Canada, and what can you sell me? And it was very slow and tedious to a point where you got them to buy in on a couple products, and then you would expand from that. And then it was kind of funny because you'd set up a customer, and then word got around, oh, there's this new company, and then someone else, well, maybe I should give them a try. So it kind of, was a bit of a domino effect in some areas. But, and getting reps on board when, again, they had never heard of Boshart. So they were like basically pioneers of our line. So they were really instrumental too in helping us get started in the U.S. But it was very slow and steady growth over the years. But the potential in the U.S., I think that was the part for me that was very I guess I wasn't as aware of what the volume could be. And one example of that is we manufactured our own torque arresters, and we had a customer that placed an order for 5,000. So I called him because I thought that must be a typo, because we had never sold that many on one order. And he said, no, that's how many he wanted. And it's like, wow. Well, then the next week, his competitor, like 20 miles away, called and ordered 2,500 torque arresters.
Okay.
It's like, wow, okay, this is serious business to be had. So that was kind of fun, just seeing the potential of that market. And, it's still such an open territory, not what I mean, but just there's so much room for growth in the U.S. because the market there is just so much bigger than it is in Canada. But even in Canada, we had a well-established customer base, but as our product line grew and we, had a lot more products to offer, it was still a challenge to get customers, even though they were well-established, to get them to take on some of the new product lines that we brought on. So.
Yeah, and was that part of like your job to kind of find the customer base in the U.S. or like how was that process?
It was a joint effort with the reps. A lot of the times it was more like you traveled with the reps and you would meet new customers, and a lot of times too you'd go to a trade show, and that's where a lot of the customers and contractors would come, and that interaction was always really valuable. And
right. And our product line, like you mentioned, it would be probably compared to what it is now.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Like how fast did that grow? Like, did you see it from like what customers were wanting? Like, is that how we would grow our line, or like how did we kind of go about that?
I think it was a combination of both. So when I started, we were primarily strong in the water well.
Right.
And I remember after we moved to Milverton and we got our first shipment of pipe fittings here. So that kind of was a bit of a turning point that we're, okay, this is a direction we're going. And then, of course, if you bring in pipe fittings, then you need pipe nipples. And then if you bring in, this product, then this goes with it. So the plumbing side was slowly expanding, which was really good. And, I mean, it continues to expand. Then you have, flexible couplings. Well, if you have flexible couplings, then you need no hub couplings. And, it just goes on and on.
Right.
And sometimes, with the new customers that we were bringing on, it was like, well, you should get into this, or you should add this to your line. And it's like, and sometimes that's good advice, and sometimes it's not as good, because you need to really know the market, and you have to listen to customers, but at the same time, you have to do what's best for the company. And, I know our competitors probably weren't as happy that we were starting to grow into the U.S. market.
Right.
But again, as I said, that was slow and steady year after year as we picked up more customers and, and more reps. So we got our name out there, and then, it's just kind of growing ever since.
When you were prospecting with those reps, maybe not to in an effort to throw anyone under the bus, but did you always see eye to eye on who you should be approaching, or what was the descriptor of a good customer to be reaching out to? Like, what was that interplay like with reps? Because I know that you're a factory direct employee, and sometimes there can be tensions that exist there. I don't know if that was true back then, but I'm just curious to hear more about the dynamic of that relationship, I guess.
Well, in the early days, too, you relied more on the rep in that territory, because they were kind of the experts, and they knew, the better customers that you maybe wanted to partner with or get set up. And our qualifying was that they had to be a wholesale distributor, and which made it a little confusing, because you would have a big contractor that felt, because of the volume they did, that they should be able to buy direct. And I remember taking calls on the phone, and it would be, "Are you a wholesale distributor?" I said, "Well, what do you need to be a wholesale distributor?" And it's like, well, then you're not, if you don't know what you need to do to be one. But we also had customer lists where you knew, like in a buying group, you could get a list of accounts. So you knew you could obviously focus on them. But a lot of times, too, it was up to the rep in that field, in that territory, to give you, the best customers to pick from and set them up. And I mean, it was tough because even though you would go and call on a customer, they were often very hesitant. Again, they didn't know us, and Boshart Industries, who's that? Or if they did know us, they thought we were only a water well account or a water well supplier. And, you're trying to sell them plumbing, and it's like, I don't know if you can be competitive in that. But it was just a lot of back and forth. And did we set up every customer that applied? No. But for the most part, if they were, a wholesale distributor, their credits references came back good, we would definitely set them up. And
Yeah, that makes sense.
yeah.
So obviously you would have had many different customer visits with reps. Are there any particularly funny or memorable ones that you can share, at least on camera? I know I'm sure there's plenty we'll leave on the cutting room floor, but any particularly funny or interesting, or maybe even if you can't think of anything like that, but just like a turning point where maybe something clicked for the first time and you saw your job in a different light, maybe.
So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of interesting customer visits and that. But I think maybe one thing that kind of hit home for me is at a trade show one time in the U.S., and there was a customer had stopped by our booth, and he was asking about Boshart, like, what makes you so great? Like, why should I buy from you? And so I started going through a list of things that we offered as a company to our customers. And one of the things that I mentioned was that if you have a back order and the original order was prepaid, that someone will call you from our office and give you the opportunity to add to a back order. And as I was saying that, one of our existing customers walked by, and he turned into the booth and he goes, "And they really do it." And I thought, wow, they do appreciate that. And it's like, it's something very simple and very basic, but it was kind of like, wow, this is, it's a simple thing, but yeah, we need to keep honing on that. We need to keep stressing that point because it does make a difference. And just, I think too, developing the relationships with the customers and getting to know them and earning their respect, because then they would come to you for advice, and it's kind of like, okay, they trust me, they are coming to me for help. So that it's kind of like, yeah, this is going to work, and this is good.
Yeah, that tucks right into like what we've talked about. I know Sean Hansen was one where we talked about being a trusted advisor, right? And how that's just such a great opportunity to build long-lasting partnerships, truly, with your customers, right? One of the other things I wanted to touch on just real quick there about, being able to add on to back orders, for example. COVID naturally was not a very nice time for many businesses, but for Boshart, I think we did a lot of interesting things that actually strengthened a lot of relationships with our customers. Is there anything there, whether it was a specific thing that we did that you can touch on, but more just kind of the lesson or the take home that you kind of took from that really made COVID not as crappy as it could have been, perhaps?
We did a lot of video meetings over the phone, and just more, personal contact with the customers, even though we couldn't get in to see them, just making more phone calls as opposed to just emails. And that's always been kind of one of my things that I like to stress to the inside team is don't just email a customer when you want to ask a question. Or I said, pick up the phone and call them, because, before we had email back in the early days, you were on the phone all the time talking to customers, and that's how you developed the relationships, and that's how you got to know your customers. And then it wasn't just, you could pick up the phone and ask somebody, oh, last time I spoke, you were doing this and that. How did that work out for you? And I think COVID, took away the face-to-face, but it brought maybe back a different personal contact through the phone as opposed to just email.
Do you have like a favorite way that you kind of get to know a customer? Like when you go, like maybe like an icebreaker or something that you used or that you learned over the years?
One thing I found too, when I was with a customer and you'd be sitting in their office that tells you a lot about a person. And I remember being at a customer one time, and they, had NFL football all over the office. So we, in my little limited bit of knowledge I have about NFL football, we were able to find something to talk about that wasn't business, kind of like a bit of an icebreaker. And I remember leaving the meeting, and the rep said, "Oh, I didn't know that you were into NFL football." I said, "I'm not," just so you know. Or I remember being at another customer, and she had a very unique painting on her wall, and I commented on it. Well, it was one that she had painted herself. So she was, quite happy to talk about, all the things she's painted in that. And it's like, so it just kind of took it away from business right off the bat. You found something to, I guess, break the ice with and then carry on. But so there's always, you just have to be aware when you're going into someone's office to look around and see, okay, what can we kind of talk about? And, especially the first meeting. After a while, when you've been calling on the same customer time and time again, obviously you don't do that. But, you get to know their family, so you can ask how their kids' soccer is going or how, whatever.
Well, that reminds me, I was riding along with some of our outside sales team in Florida. This is now a couple of years ago. And we were calling upon some would-be customers just to introduce ourselves and kind of talk about stuff. And we would walk into the office and shake hands and kind of sit down, and they would go, "Oh yeah, Boshart. I used to buy from Boshart. There's a woman named Brenda. She handled us." And I kid you not, out of the maybe 7 or 8 locations that we went to in the span of 2 days or something that I was down there, probably 4 of them remembered you from many years later. So I could dig up names if you really want me to. But to me, it was a testament of how well you had been known and what an impression that you'd left on people. And even when I was out west with our outside sales team there, again, a couple of years ago, we were doing the classic, Timbit drop off that we do, or donut holes for our American friends. And that is reminiscent, or that was something that Mel would do.
Yes.
Right? Is that. And so even as we were doing that, to hear people bring up Mel's name, however many years later, again, just speaks to the impression that I think we as an organization did really well. But it's obviously never the organization, it's the individuals within that organization. I think that's just such a testament to you, Brenda.
Well, thank you.
And just how awesome that was to experience. Now, I'm curious, when you came on with the company, did you have an idea of all of the opportunities that lay ahead of you? So, did you believe to, surely you'd hope, okay, maybe in a couple of years I'll make a little bit more an hour or something, but did you have any idea that it would become what it would become, that it would go from this 14-person operation to in the hundreds one day?
I think I knew there was always growth and opportunities, but it just, and it was every year there was, the sales increased and we grew, but looking back, I remember when we hit 100 million in sales, it's like, how did that happen? That is just unbelievable. And that was a number of years ago, so I'm not really sure what our sales would be now, but compared to when I started, it's just like, wow, this is incredible. And when you're in it and when you're doing the day-to-day work, you don't really stop and think. You just keep doing and going, pushing ahead, and then all of a sudden you see a milestone like that and you just think, wow, this is amazing. So it's like,
No kidding.
I knew there would always be, potential. And as we were, adding on to our warehouse and, expanding across the street in Plant 2, that, we're growing and we're not done. And now we've just, had a 60,000 square foot addition added again. And it's just like, wow, there's no stopping. This is just continuing to snowball, and we're, which is really exciting and great for the company. So I think I always knew, that this company would do well and would grow. But it's just, and I mean, 37 years has gone by extremely quickly. You think back and it's like, wow, now, over 3/4 of the people aren't even probably 37 years old that work here. But no, it's been something, I had the vision, but I don't think maybe anticipated it would come quite as quickly as what it actually did.
That's fair. Well, that's one of the things that I love and find very endearing about you is that when we are in meetings, and it's one of a billion meetings where I'm trying to extract as much knowledge and information from you as I selfishly can get, you'll bring up something and you'll be like, oh, well, actually, this was a number of years ago. And then when you do the math, you're like, maybe it was about 20, 25 years ago. And it's incredible to me, though, and it speaks to how fresh all of this stuff is in your mind and how much you remember it. And again, like just all the different milestones along the way of Boshart's history. And again, how much you've contributed to that. So my next question to you is kind of on that topic of milestones. So naturally, COVID's a big one, or expanding into the U.S. is a big one. But for maybe Boshart corporately, or maybe just even you as an individual, what was a milestone that felt kind of like a turning point or a before and after where, again, it was a really big lesson learned, whether that was with a customer or whether it was exactly something like hitting a sales goal or something like that, or traveling to, a particular state or something like that. But can you think of a milestone in the past 37 years that you really felt like, oh, this changes things, even if it was just subtle and personal and maybe not totally obvious to someone on the surface?
Well, I think too, like back in the early days, as I said, you were looking for sales reps to, pioneer your line, and not to put down any of the sales reps that we have hired in that, but you took any rep that was interested in your line, so to speak. And as your sales grew in that particular territory, then the reps started calling you, wanting to work for the company. And I think at that point, as that started happening more frequently, I thought, okay, like this is good. We're crushing it. Like when people want to come and work for you, things have turned, right?
I love that. That's great. Again, you've been out on the road many a times, had many customer meetings. Can you think of one of the best meals you ever had? I know that's absolutely, well, it's work related in a manner of speaking, but I'm just so curious because I know for me, especially when I started here and I would get out on the road a little bit, and again, I'm just in marketing, right? I'm not even in sales. And so I would, in the early days, I would text pictures to my wife of like, oh, check out this incredible meal I'm eating. And I eventually learned not to do that because my wife would say, well, I'm reheating leftover mac and cheese for the kids for the third day in a row. So don't send me pictures of your incredible restaurant. So.
Well, I learned too very early on too not to come home and brag about the delicious meals that I had because it was like didn't go over as well as I didn't want to rub it in. But as far as the best meal I've had on the road, I do remember being in Providence, Rhode Island, and it was about this time of the year. It was in the fall, and I had the best salmon dinner I have ever had.
Really?
And it was, I can't even describe it, but I remember purposely eating as slow as I could because I didn't want that meal to end because it was so delicious. That was probably one of the best meal, but I just remember too, when I traveled in New England, and again, early on, I was not a seafood lover, but I very quickly became one when I was in New England. I think 1 week, every day I had clam chowder at lunch, and the rep said, is that all you're going to eat? I said, hey, I'm in New England. I'm going to eat as much clam chowder as I can. And
I love that. Would you give, what state, I guess, would you give the crown as the best food that you've eaten at? Is that possible to do?
Oh, that would be really tricky.
That's all right.
Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Maine, those,
Up there, eh? Good.
Yeah.
All right.
I
Good to
think
know.
that would be for me.
Pocket.
And, the other thing, too, is Bill Hastings, who was our first rep there and is still our rep, knew where the best places were to eat in New England.
Okay.
And it was amazing. Like, I remember going to one place, and I questioned him when I said, this is where we're going for lunch? Because it literally, if you were a tourist traveling through, you would kind of just keep going. You wouldn't want to stop. But the food was unbelievable. And it was neat because they didn't have a menu. They had it on a chalkboard. And you ate whatever was posted on the chalkboard, and it changed every day. But there was always an amazing seafood dish in that. So
You have told a story before about like a porterhouse dinner, steak dinner, and that's kind of like a funny story. Do you have any more like memorable, funny stories, even involving not necessarily dinner, but like anything with a customer or a rep while you were traveling?
I remember traveling with a coworker, we were in Arkansas, and she was always wanting to not stay at haunted hotels, which I did not believe in. So we get to this hotel. I can't remember the name of it. I think it was in Little Rock, Arkansas, or Lake of the Ozarks. I'm not sure, but anyway, this hotel had like a haunted vibe to it when we pulled up. And she goes, "I think this one's haunted." And I said, "Oh, come on." And we had dinner in the hotel restaurant that night, and she did ask the server, "Is this a haunted hotel?" And he looked around and he goes, "Yeah." But really only the odd numbered floors are where they've recorded sightings. So we were on the 5th floor.
Oh, perfect.
So it was like, okay, this is going to be interesting. And it was an old hotel, so it wasn't like, the new hotels now where you had an old-fashioned key and like the door didn't shut right. So, and she, it's not that our rooms were even side by side. We got off the elevator, which was a whole other experience. She went one way and I went the other, and it's like, oh, we're not even close together. And then it's like, oh, maybe this is haunted, but I didn't see a ghost or anything. But it was kind of an eerie feeling to be there. But she planted that seed. But
that's funny.
yeah,
No haunted.
No
specifically.
haunted. No, I can't say that I ever saw a ghost on my travels.
I'm just going to switch gears a little bit here, but like you have worked under 3 different presidents. So Mel, Gary, and Julie. Can you describe like what the difference is between each one, similarities?
Things you learned.
Yeah, things you
Well,
learned.
I've learned from all of them. Like I said early on, I traveled with Mel in Western Canada, and people absolutely loved him. And we could get appointments, or we didn't even need appointments. If you showed up and said, "Oh, Mel Boshart's here," some of the customers literally would drop what they're doing and, want to see him. And I learned a lot, just the way he interacted with our customers, and, had a very calm and humble approach to things, and people really just loved him. And he was a very interesting person to, sit down with that night and have a dinner. And turned out we knew a lot of people in common, like he knew of my parents and, some of my aunts and uncles. So we would have these very, neat discussions at dinner. So, I learned a lot just how he interacted with customers. Then I, traveled with Gary too, and the same, approach. Him and Mel were very similar in some ways. And when Julie started, a lot of times as we were growing, her and I had the, same roles, just in different geographies. So we did a lot of the same things, and, I learned from her. Hopefully she learned a little bit from me too. But I would say one thing they all had in common is 3 of the most hardworking people that I've ever worked with or had the, the privilege to work with. And I think when they are all hardworking in that, it just makes you want to work hard too, because you want to be like them and you want to contribute. And but they're all, I think, respect them all very much. And I'd say they're all some of the hardest working people I've ever seen.
Absolutely. All well known for good reason.
You're right.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Have left small legacies of their own. You were kind of touching on it, and I would love to ask, were there any heartfelt moments with a customer? So, you're kind of talking about maybe with Mel that he knew some of your family and there was some connections there. And so what I love about that is when it starts to go beyond just being work, right? But beyond just numbers and trying to sell you something so you can sell it to someone, but really touches on the human side of what we do. And obviously this, I think, is one of Boshart Industries' greatest strengths is that care, concern, love for the individual that is contributing to it. And so I'm curious, with your customers or with a coworker, has there ever been a moment where you ever felt like, oh, this is about more than just product, or this, what I do can have more meaning and value and impact than just, hit all my numbers, right? Because again, Brenda, one thing I would say that I have always really enjoyed about working with you is, obviously you are so lovely and so caring, but you choose to do so when you don't necessarily have to. And I guess I'm curious to understand more of what drives that, and maybe if, again, there was a customer experience or an employee, a coworker experience where you were like, this is bigger than just numbers on a sheet of paper.
Well, I remember calling on a customer in northern Saskatchewan that had been a customer of ours when I started, and got to know them, called on them multiple times, and the owner of the company had said that Mel had called on them a long, long time ago, and he was one of the first salespeople to make the trip to see him, and that they just loved Mel right from the get-go, and they had nothing but great things to say about Mel and the company, and they became one of, I don't have favorite customers, but they would rank in the top list of favorite customers to call on, and they were just so open to trying new things. If we brought on a new product line, they would definitely give it a shot. They would try it, and they would provide good feedback, and they expanded and grew as we were, and they were, adding new staff, and, we attended their open houses. We had them come for customer training, and you just kept developing that relationship. And I remember talking to Mel because they had a new location, and then Mel was no longer traveling the prairies. He was just Alberta, BC, but they had expanded their warehouse. And I said to Mel, I said, what would really mean a lot? I said, if you could go when you're, close to that border and you could cross over and go visit the account, I said, that would mean the world to them. So Mel did that. The next time he was in that part of Alberta, he made the trip. And I wished I could have been there to see their reaction when he was there. But I said, it's like, they loved Mel, and the fact that he went out of his way to come and see them after so many years just meant a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You've mentioned northern Saskatchewan as perhaps a place that you didn't expect to have such a great partner. Or I imagine, when you look at like a heat map of the population of Canada, it's a lot all the way west and a lot in Ontario. But whether in the U.S. or Canada, was there any other states or towns or territories or just places you traveled to that you found particularly interesting, or was a bit of a hidden gem? I'm always looking for places to add to a road trip. So if you've got, other than good clam chowder in New England, okay, so got that.
Can't stress that enough.
Is there anywhere else that, whether it caught you off guard on a visit, or was just somewhere that you were happy to finally cross off the bucket list that really meant a lot to you?
Another place that I would recommend people should go visit if they haven't, and I was able to go there a number of times, is San Antonio, Texas.
Okay.
That is a very interesting place to go. San Francisco, had been there to do a presentation to a buying group and had an opportunity to spend a few days there, because back in the day you had to stay a Saturday night to get a decent flight. Now that has changed, but so we had some free time. It's really hard to pinpoint a favorite territory. I mean, British Columbia probably would be, it's hard to beat.
Mm-hmm.
It's just so beautiful, the scenery.
No kidding.
Is there anywhere that you didn't get to that you would have loved to have traveled to?
So in Canada, I was fortunate that I have traveled across Canada. I've been to every province. I have not been to any of the territories yet, but that is on my bucket list.
That's what retirement's for.
Yeah, that's what retirement will be for. In the U.S., I did, with my kids a couple of years ago, we added up all the states that I had been to when I worked in the U.S., and I think I was to 41.
Okay.
One state that I'd never been to that I really wished I could have would have been Montana, because I've just heard it's so beautiful, and So maybe that'll be on my bucket list to get to Montana.
Well, I mean, we've got some people out there now, so you can always give
yeah,
them a ring.
find
when
an
you're in
excuse
town.
to.
Yeah, they'll take you around and they'll give you the New England. Maybe there will be a hidden gem there too. Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, I feel like Julie has also said that Montana was one of her favorite states in terms of just visual beauty.
Yes.
If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
That was a place that she, I feel like, again, if I'm not misquoting, she has said that she really, really loved. One of
I was thinking one other place that came to mind was, again, many years ago, I traveled Nebraska.
Okay.
For some reason, I just found Nebraska was a neat place to travel. And I remember the rep saying, oh, you're going to be so, Nebraska. They were kind of downplaying it. And I said, no, I like Nebraska. Like, I definitely would come back. Or Iowa. Like, they were just all a little slower pace. And, obviously New York City or Orlando. But, again, a lot of nice people there and nice customers. And it was,
So speaking of New York City, is there any interesting New York City stories that you can commit to tell? I know of one. I don't know. You can plead the fifth on this one if it's better not to say it. But I know from absolutely downtown Manhattan to out in the boonies in the middle of nowhere, right? You've traveled to a number of places. Is there anything you can share about your experience in New York City specifically, or do you want to pass on that one?
No, I mean, New York City is a very interesting place to travel, and you do learn as you go what are the rules and what are not rules. And I remember the first time traveling with the rep, and I don't like to carry my purse into sales calls a lot of the time because it's just too cumbersome in that. So I said, is it all right if I leave my purse? And he said, absolutely not. Because you're in New York City. I said, okay. So I said, can we lock it in the trunk? He goes, no, that doesn't work either.
Like you're crazy.
Yeah, crazy lady. So I said, okay, I'm in New York City. And I remember we were in Brooklyn, and we had a 2:00 appointment. And he's looking at his watch, and he goes, okay, we need to be out of Brooklyn by 3:00. I said, yeah, but it's only 3:00. We need to be out of Brooklyn, this part of Brooklyn, by 3:00. I said, I didn't question him, but he said, no, we trust me, we need to leave. So I was like, okay, I trust you.
Yeah.
I definitely would trust you with my life.
Apparently, I didn't know I signed up for that. Yeah,
I didn't know I signed up for that, but I mean, and I was fortunate because, whenever I traveled to a lot of the bigger cities like, Boston or New York City or Orlando, I always had a rep that would, do the driving and knew the lay of the land. So, which I was fortunate. I didn't really have to do anything but just listen to their advice. Mm-hmm. The one story I think it was in Brooklyn, we were calling on a customer, and they were there's a lot of older buildings there, obviously, in New York City. And remember going to see this one customer, and we had to come out of the warehouse, and then his office was kind of upstairs. We had to go back outside and up these wooden stairs to his office. And as I opened the door, a big rat ran across the bottom stair. And I hate mice, I hate frogs, I hate any little... And all I could do to not scream. But I maintained my composure, and the rep kind of laughed, and he said, it'll be fine. So up I went, up to this office.
That was the story I was hoping you would
That
tell.
was the one you were thinking of.
I wasn't going to call it out specifically, but...
No, that was a memorable trip,
just,
yes.
Yeah, we're not in Kansas anymore.
Yeah.
That's
Exactly.
That's what that would feel like, I'm sure. Once again, switching gears just a little bit here, I'm curious to hear your perspective on the water well industry and the plumbing industry as a whole. So over your 37 years here, how have you seen those industries grow and change, and what do you foresee anything for the future? So obviously, again, even for us as a master distributor, we have continued to expand our lineup and seen great success with that. And I know even just in the past number of years since I've been here, we've seen water well distributors bringing on plumbing products and vice versa. So have you also seen changes like that over the years? And does that give you any indication of what might be ahead, or do you have any thoughts on all that?
Like I said, in the early days, we definitely were primarily water well based, but adding products gradually to strengthen our plumbing offering. And there's still much, more products, I think, to be had on the plumbing side. And again, it's kind of like, where do you start and stop? And, I remember someone saying, oh, you don't want to get into this product because it's too competitive. And it's like, well, what isn't competitive? Like,
Yeah.
And I think, too, it's been a gradual growth on the plumbing side. But again, in Canada, I feel like customers carry both. Like, it's a smaller market, and depending on the area, there's a lot of rural customers that we have. So they have to be more diversified and carry a bigger product offering. Whereas I feel like, obviously, New York City, you're not going to have a lot of pitless adapters and well caps, and that is strictly, plumbing. And again, once you get into some of these plumbing accounts, it's like, well, you should carry this because your competitor have these products to offer. But it takes time and it takes a lot of, research. But I still feel, plumbing is probably an industry that we can continue to grow, which will only strengthen our position.
When you would, so when you're talking about kind of comparing two different types of customers, so the customer, maybe more for us, that's a Canadian customer that does both plumbing and water well, but then maybe more in the U.S., you have those that are more specialized in one or the other. From a sales perspective, was that easier or harder? Like, did you prefer one over the other? Did you just love the variety? How did that change your approach to kind of what you did?
I think it was always a challenge. I mean, first of all, you had to do some research to find out kind of where was the strength of the customer, and are they more plumbing based? Are they more water well? And then we actually, in a lot of territories, would have plumbing specific reps and water well. We kind of put water well and irrigation together, and plumbing was kind of separate because the plumbing accounts were more separated than they maybe carried a little bit of water well, but it was a challenge to, especially I would say more so on the plumbing, because we weren't known for plumbing. So it was, again, you were kind of pioneering the line all over again with a different customer base.
That's interesting because I know Sean Hansen in the U.S. has talked about, particularly when he's prospecting and he's walking into, potential customers who don't know us yet. And I think at times if I'm not mistaken, at least has told me that he enjoys when that potential customer doesn't know who Boshart is, because he sees it as a blank canvas and he can kind of fill it in, versus the other times if he does get, Boshart, I know you, water well something, is that right? That he almost finds that a bit of an uphill battle. So did you feel like one or the other was better, that, the blank slate or kind of filling in the gaps? Like, did you prefer one or the other?
That's a good question. I think, too, I would tend to agree with Sean that if they didn't know you and didn't think of you as water well, that was one less hurdle that you had to get over right off the bat. And then you could just strictly focus on, yes, we are, based out of Canada. We do have all these products that, for the plumbing industry. But it was sometimes a big hurdle to get over with customers that only saw you as water well. And now, as our plumbing sales have grown over the year, now the reverse is also sometimes the truth, because it could be a water well account that only knows us more on the plumbing side. Not as frequently, but, that has changed a little bit.
Do you find that wholesalers now are having the same challenges as maybe they were, 10, 20, 30 years ago, or is there new challenges that they're facing now?
I think, too, like wholesalers, to keep in certain markets, I think they have to be more diversified, too, and get into additional markets just to keep business going. Like we've had to, like we're in, irrigation, we're in industrial, we're in, obviously plumbing and water well. And I think, customers have to be willing to expand to where it needs to happen.
So I started in the warehouse and then I moved up to customer service. So I did Manitoba, Thunder Bay, all that.
Yeah.
And I remember like I would get off the phone with a customer and I would come and talk to you and I would, tell you about, oh, like this person mentioned you or mentioned a story that maybe you'd be able to share. And so that was something I always really enjoyed, that I could, talk to you about somebody and you would know what I was going through. So do you have any advice for people that are starting in sales or working with the different customers that you've just kind of learned over the years that can help them? Because sometimes I was a little nervous about being on the phone or different things like that. Is there something that you could give to them to help them?
Sure. I mean, like I said, when I was asked to help out on the order desk, my first comment was, well, I don't know products. And Gary was very encouraging and said, well, you'll learn more as you go. It'll come. And another bit of advice that he gave me, and I would pass it on to anybody, was if you don't know the answer, tell them you'll get back to them. Don't pretend that you know or give them information that you're not 100% sure of. And that was maybe some of the best advice. Because if I didn't know an answer and you told the customer, look, I'm not 100% sure, but let me find out and I'll get back to you. And then obviously make sure you get back to them. But that always, was very helpful and that was very successful. And I would say it doesn't matter what the position is. If you don't know the answer, find out. Don't try to bluff your way, because a customer will pick up on that. And then you're trying to earn respect and, gain their confidence in that. And you do something like that and that just shoots it right back down.
And I feel like Boshart has gotten really well at providing different forms of like education.
Yes.
Like we've started the Boshart U blogs. That was, I believe, 2019. And then it evolved to knowledge-based articles and it's evolved to Accelerator. And so those are not necessarily great tools for customers to use, but also for our staff here
Right.
on just learning products and feeling more confident. So,
And before we had all those, the Boshart U and the knowledge base, back in the early days, you just had to go to someone and ask them, right? Whether it was Gary, whether it was Mark, whether it was Mel, or, Paul, there was a number of people, but they're always very willing to answer the question. And then once the question was asked, it kind of started, okay, I get it, And so it did build, and I mean, you did become more confident. But there has always been, whether it was the resources that you mentioned or the actual people, there was always that support behind the scenes. And that was really beneficial. And, but I would say, yeah, good advice. Always ask if you're not sure.
Yeah, you're never alone. There's somebody here.
Yeah.
We've had lots of people here that have been here for several years, and they're still go-to people.
And I also remember too, like Gary and Mel, it didn't seem to matter how busy they were. If you had a call from, often contractors phoned in direct and had a question about a product. If Mel was in the office and you ran the question by him, he said, I'll talk to them. And he would stop what he was doing and he would speak to a contractor or a homeowner if they called about a problem. And he was always willing to do that. And, when I started, we sold to contractors as well. So there was always getting their input into product developments, or if they were running into issues with a product of ours, everyone was always willing to hear their feedback, whether it was, good or bad. But it was, that kind of amazed me that, Gary and Mel, as busy as they were, if a contractor had a question or a concern, they were always willing to stop what they were doing and speak with them.
When you look back at customer relationships that you've built over the years, I would assume that there are a few that have lasted quite a while. And so are you able to speak to, especially for someone new maybe to the industry or just trying to kind of get their footing in sales, what have been some of the biggest keys to success for you to build a long-term relationship? And, whether that is strictly in the business context, is there, business relationships that have become personal relationships that these people and you catch up and you talk about your kids and things. But I especially want to know, do you have pointers for someone on like, here's what I did that really changed how people saw me?
I think too, when I would be out on sales calls, is I would always really pay attention to to the customers. Like you would ask questions, and I always took a ton of notes, and I think it, did a couple of things, helped me remember what the conversation was about. But I think it also showed the customer that I was paying attention, and what they were saying was important to me. And again, the biggest thing I think would be following through on what you say you're going to do in a meeting, whether it's get back to them with the price, whether it is send them samples, and make sure you do it. And that you start to build that relationship and earn their trust and respect. Very basic, very simple things, but I think, don't go into a call and promise them the world and walk out and then forget about them, because the next time you go in, they're not going to give you that same time or.
Right.
I get that. That makes sense. Has there been, a particular accomplishment that you're really proud of in your years? So as you start to look back on all the things that you've done, again, whether that was a particular customer whose business you won, or maybe it was just surviving and covering such broad territories on opposite sides of the continent and doing that successfully. But is there anything that you're like, oh yeah, that felt good, that whether even if it's just real small, it has your name on it somewhere?
I think too, it's, there are still, I haven't been in sales now for a number of years with the new pricing role, but I still have some customers that I reach out to on a regular basis just to say hi. And, they check in on my kids, I check in on theirs. And, some of the customers have retired, but we still stay in touch. And, I remember calling the first time I went out to dinner with this customer and his wife. His daughter, sat in a high chair. And we still talk about that. Now she's married, and it's like, Where did that time go? And I mean, it's just been a lot of fun. And we have so many good customers. Like, I can't think of a customer really that I didn't like or that I didn't enjoy calling on, because really they've all been so amazing and supportive. And I think back too, in the early days, there weren't very many females that called on wholesale accounts. So maybe they cut me a bit of slack. I don't know. But I remember one rep that I traveled with, and, we were talking about product knowledge, because he said, there's one thing that you could, sharpen your skills on, what would it be? And I said, well, product knowledge for me wasn't really a stumbling block, but I always wished I had Mark or Paul's knowledge, because they could just talk on any product, and it was like, how do they know all this stuff? And he made a comment that, made me feel a lot better. And he said, well, what you lack in product knowledge, he said, you more than make up in your attention to detail and your follow through.
Wow.
And I thought, okay, well, thank you for that. So I kind of let that sink in, and I thought, okay, I can't possibly know every detail about all the products we have, but I can use the resources and just continue to do what I'm doing to be successful.
Well, just to backtrack a little bit from what you were saying before about if a customer were to ask you something that you genuinely didn't know the answer to, that was a very incredible gift you gave me early on in my time here, because I remember some of the first trade shows that I had attended with Boshart. I think I just kind of had two bad coincidences in a row where I had a contractor stop by and ask me very specific questions about, stamps or markings on one of our products or something. It was just not even in my repertoire to even hint at answering it. And I remember just clamming up and being very stressed out anytime everyone would leave the booth and I was left alone. I'd look around and watching my watch just to be like, when is someone getting back to save me, right? But yeah, I'm sure at some point I must have been expressing something to that extent to you. And you had shared hey, just tell them, hey, I genuinely don't know, and I'll follow up with you. And again, the emphasis on actually following up, right? And that really gave me permission not to know everything. But,
and not,
and
don't beat yourself up about it, because it takes time. And
absolutely, right? And so that, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Was incredibly helpful. And again, it's something that even I hope I've shared with my team well enough, is just yeah, you don't have to know everything off the top of your head, but at the very least, that's an opportunity then to go and expand your knowledge at least, right? Kind of tucking into all of that as we slowly start to wrap this conversation up. I could talk with you for hours, just to be clear, but at some point we should probably eat lunch today.
Right, that would be good.
You know, when you look back at your career, is there a particular lesson? Obviously, you shared tons and tons of lessons already, but is there another lesson that you haven't said aloud yet, maybe, or just something you want to just, you know, underscore and emphasize once again, of just something that was transformational for you in your career? So, you know, one of the questions, it was earlier, and we kind of glossed over, the conversation took a different turn, was just, you know, what are some of the things that have made you as successful as you are? And I know that you're too humbled to brag about yourself, but I'm going to ask you to try for just a moment, because I think, again, Brenda, your career is a testament to your dedication and your hard work and your you know, your desire for excellence. So I think those are all great things. And I know that you have things like, you, as incredible as you are not superwoman, that you can do these things, and you have just learned things and other people have poured into you. So I'm curious, again, if there's anything you can share to say, like, this was pivotal or foundational or transformational about just the way you approach your job and what you do.
Well, one thing that came to mind when you're asking that question is the company has always given their employees opportunities to improve themselves by way of, you know, different seminars or training opportunities. And I always took advantage of any opportunity that I could, just to get a better understanding, you know, what maybe the expectation was or how to handle a situation. So I would encourage people, even if you don't think it actually pertains to you or your position, if you're given that opportunity to get training, take it. And, you know, I took the opportunity as often as I could. And I mean, I've been to seminars on, you know, time management and, you know, just how to deal with difficult employees, or, you know, just a whole range of things. And at the time I thought, oh, maybe this applies, maybe it doesn't. But it always did apply to some part of your job. And even if you think it doesn't, if you're given that opportunity, go for it and put yourself out there. And maybe if you think you can't do something, don't sell yourself short. You know, try it. And I mean, like, and I go back again to that very example that just starting out on the order desk, and I was hesitant, but, you know, Gary believed in me and I had the support. So, like I said, if someone would have said, would you have ever seen yourself, you know, being a sales manager with the territory? I would just laugh and say, absolutely not. I would have not applied for that position had it been the one, you know, that I, you know, started with. So I would just say, take advantage of all the opportunities, put yourself out there, be, you know, make yourself uncomfortable and you'll learn from that. And, you know, and don't be afraid to ask questions.
Is that the kind of mindset that you had when you switched your roles to be in pricing? Or like what drew you to switching to being in pricing?
I think I saw the need for that role, like, for a long time. As I said, there was a number of different people that were doing pricing, and it was kind of like not cut up, but there were, you know, this person had this responsibility and this person, and yet I felt there was maybe something missing. And, you know, being on the road is tiring. And I think, too, when COVID hit and you couldn't travel, I honestly thought, oh, I'm really good. How am I going to do that? Like, I've been so used to traveling, and I did really love it for the most part. And then when COVID came and it just stopped, once I was off the road and, you know, I thought, oh, you know, I kind of like this now, you know. And then this opportunity came, and I think I was just ready to be home more. And I, you know, had grandchildren, and so that changes your whole perspective on things. And so it was a good transition. But again, just asking questions and.
Well, maybe speaking of those grandkids, the last question I would love to ask you is potentially a very personal one. You can take it in whatever way you want, but when you look back over your career here at Boshart, maybe when you're talking to one of your grandkids and you're telling them about your time here, can you share a bit with us about what you will share with them about how you would start to even summarize your career here?
For my grandchildren, I can also tell them that both of their mothers worked here part-time in the summer, so their mothers would have some insight too. But I would just tell them that it's been a very family-oriented feeling company. Like the company has done so much for its employees and continue to do that. And they have so many, company picnics and company barbecues. And I would just say, if you can get into a place that offers all of this, go for it. Don't judge a book by its cover kind of thing. Don't judge a company by what you think they do or don't do. But, the company culture here is amazing. And I think I would stress that to my grandchildren, that find a job or a company that you like or a profession that you like and stick with it and give it your all.
What about even just on a personal level? What has being an employee of Boshart meant to you and how it's impacted, changed the trajectory of your life and so on?
Oh, that's, like I said, it's just been amazing. From when we were 14 employees till now there were 100 and, I don't know,
over
70.
200, yeah.
Over 200, and I don't know a third of the employees, but, there's still enough from the core group that, you can reminisce about the good old days and, how things have changed, but it's always been positive and, just a lot of fun and hard work, but a lot of fun at the same time. And the dynamics have changed and they haven't changed. Like I said, it's a bigger company, but there's still that same feeling. And like I said, never has there been a day that I didn't want to get up and come to work. And
Yeah.
And people say, oh, that can't be true. And it's like, yeah, it can be. If you find the right place,
Yep, it can be.
it can be.
I love that.
And I think somebody asked me a while ago, were you ever considered leaving the company? And I said, no, never.
Wow.
Never.
That's amazing.
Yeah, that is amazing.
Well, Brenda, thank you so much for your time. This has
been good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
so nice to finally have you on here and to chat. And yeah, I feel like I know you better now, even just learning more about your time here. So thanks again for taking the time. Thanks for all the wisdom you've shared, not just in this podcast episode, but to all of us personally. We are better because of you. So
thank you for that.
Thank you, Brenda.
And that is our episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you haven't yet, be sure to head to contractorelite.co to get signed up for our weekly newsletter, where there's tons of exclusive content and reminders about new Contractor Elite episodes that drop. Also, be sure to subscribe to us on your favorite podcasting platform, whether that's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube. And until then, we'll catch you in the next one.